you did a literature review. So you looked at what people were doing before you, and you kind of saw or summarized or reviewed previous work. If you had to wave a magic wand and you could get or quantify or, like measure some sort of metric, which you think would be a strong predictor, or multiple, you think like your top three,
Yeah.
where would you start looking? Again, we're talking physiological here, so I don't know if
Yeah.
like gut absorption will fit into this.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that's part of reflecting on your PhD. If you had asked me this question, could I go back and change parts of my
Mm.
PhD? What would I change? I think you'd get a very similar answer from me because you learn through your PhD. The PhD is just it's just a one long big opportunity to learn, and I think what I probably tried to do, of course, was to develop an uphill test battery, which had multiple different gradients, including some very steep hiking, because I thought to myself, perhaps, not having the uphill element is why we're seeing such weak relationships in these papers. And there was some evidence, Sabine Ostrom, as I mentioned, when they added running economy at 10% instead of running economy at 0% gradient, their relationship, that R value, increased quite significantly. So I thought, well, if we go even steeper to really mimic the demands of mountain running, perhaps we'll see some nuance there. Perhaps 25% is even stronger than 10%, or maybe not. I think what I failed to understand at the time is the distance that I was modeling for, which is 100 kilometers. That was the race. We've got another paper which hopefully will be published this year, which is sort of the culmination of all of this work. The distance I was modeling for is 100 kilometers. And, having run that distance myself now, I still believe running economy is more important than VO2 max or lactate threshold because of the nature of the submaximal intensity of the running. But it's not actually the metric that causes you. This is the whole thing of associations and relationships. I mean, the metric doesn't cause you to be faster. It's the culmination of all of the adaptations you've made over the training process, which just so happen to improve your economy and also your race performance. So I think at the start it was more a conceptual link that I didn't quite have right in my head. So I know I'm going on a maybe sideways answer to your question here, but just bear with me. If you look at running economy as a raw metric itself, we measure the cost of running. So how much oxygen do you need to consume, or what's the oxygen uptake that you require to maintain some sort of stable running speed or intensity for 1 kilometer? Okay, so that's running economies. The milliliters of oxygen uptake per kilogram of body mass, because we always do it relative to a person's size or frame, and then per kilometer. And by that logic, somebody who consumes less oxygen in a kilometer than somebody else at the same relative speed is more economical. But the question is, I suppose, and again, I didn't fully understand this when I started, is why are they more economical? What's actually making them more economical? And a lot of it's got to do with energy wastage or conservation of energy. So as you become sort of more efficient, a better runner, you have certain biomechanical adaptations that start to take place. Okay, so your rhythm improves, your running form improves, you've got better vertical stiffness, there's less force attenuation and force loss or leakage. And so you're a more efficient person at moving through these dynamic changing environments. And so I think while economy is the thing that you can measure, it's the physiological marker that you can measure. It's not, necessarily the be all and end all. We've got to consider all of these other elements. So one thing I learned learned about through my PhD was the concept of physiological resilience or durability. So I did all of my tests when the athletes were fresh. So it's not the problem with the marker per se, but we know that over 100 kilometers, how you feel and how you look and how your body is responding at 80 kilometers or 90 kilometers is not the same as how it felt on the start line at 0 kilometers when you had your nice taper and you were fresh and you were ready to go and give your best. And what researchers like Professor Andy Jones, have noticed through research in marathon running and cycling is that these markers, VO2 max, lactate threshold, and running economy, are not static. So I mentioned earlier your VO2 max is 60 and mine is 60. It turns out that when you're fatigued, your VO2 max it could be drastically different. Okay, so when you're fatigued, your VO2 max might drop off quite significantly. But you get different durability profiles. So some runners are more durable than others. And how this is tested in laboratory is you'll do like a critical speed or critical power test if you're in cycling, which is an all-out intensive, could be as short as 3 minutes test. And then you will do a long fatigue stimulus. And this is normally in what they call sort of the moderate to heavy intensity domain. So it's not like super hard, because obviously if it was super hard, you would fatigue really quickly. But it might be 90 minutes, 2 hours, even 3 hours of just steady state, moderate to slightly difficult, and you just obviously accumulate a lot of fatigue. And then you do the same critical speed test afterwards. And what we want to know is how much does that change? So the power that you're able to produce, or the force or the speed that you're able to put out, how much does that change before and after fatigue? And it turns out that some people are a lot more resilient than others. Okay. And so if I had to go back, and if I have to speculate around what are the important markers for ultramarathon running, it's probably got less to do with these sort of fresh state markers, your capacity when you're in a lab setting. We always tell people, make sure you don't do any exercise the day before, and don't drink any alcohol, and make sure you've slept a lot, and you've eaten a carbohydrate rich meal in the morning before, and blah blah blah. And we try and make them as fresh as possible. And I think it's probably got to do with how durable you are. So it's still the same. You can still measure the same metrics. You can measure heart rate response. You can measure oxygen uptake, your lactate values, but you measure them before and after some sort of fatigue stimulus. I think where the challenge comes in with trail running is, what should that fatigue stimulus look like? Because in cycling research, it's easy to just put someone on a stationary bike and you say, right, well, that looks pretty much the same as how it looks outside. So off you go, 3 hours, and we'll test you again when you're done. Obviously, with trail running, you've got variable demands. So you've got super short races, vertical kilometers, to 100-mile races, multi-day races, technical, non-technical. So this is the phase that we're in at the moment, is trying to consider how do we create a fatigue stimulus that is specific to trail running. And then you consider the trade-offs. So another marker that I would say is a good marker for modeling performance is prior performance. I mean, the best idea I can give you of how well you're going to do at your race next weekend is if you've done that same race before and what your time was in that race, because every course is different in trail running. It's always unique. In fact, sometimes even year on year, the course changes. So, when you think about research, you always want something that you can generalize and someone else can use, and they can say, oh, well, Simon did this, so I'm going to replicate it in my lab. But you can't do that in trail running. So we have a real challenge. But I would say the best thing that you can do is have some prior experience, prior knowledge of how well you perform in that race, and then know how your body responds to fatigue.